Right. Shazia, I am so excited, really excited just to have an interview with you for this opportunity, not only for others to get to know you, but for me to get to know you as well. So it's awesome.
Me too. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for asking me. I'm really, really thrilled to be here with you.
No, and it's wonderful because, like I said, there are some people that I've interviewed within the principals community that I've known for some time, but you are relatively new to the principals. So it's always interesting and exciting to hear how people came across the principles. So let's start there. What introduced you? Yeah, what introduced you to the principles? Yeah.
So I was thinking about this actually, and I'm not as new to the principles as you might think. So I think I've been around the principles for around 7 years now. And I remember it was kind of weird. It was through a friend, my first introduction to the principles. And I met Aaron and Leela Turner, and not really with the intention of learning anything about the principles or becoming a student of theirs or anything like that. It was just through friendship. So it was very organic. And so I got to know them, and I started to hang out with them a little bit. And I just remember thinking their life seemed really great. You know, they just seemed really happy. I mean, not in that their life was particularly extraordinary. It was normal. They were, you know, normal working parents to 2 kids, and it was very normal, but their experience of it seemed really fun. And I remember there was this one time I was at their house, and they were playing this weird game that I'd introduced them to, and it was like there was this childlike joy on their faces, and they would like flirt with each other, and I was like, you guys have been married for how long? And so for me that was really interesting, and that really sparked some curiosity in me, like what's going on here? What's this secret sauce that you guys have access to that's making you enjoy these really banal, like really simple, banal things in life? And so I got curious, and I got interested, and I started to come along to the 3 Principles conferences and read a bit of Sydney Banks, and you know, just get involved a little bit in what was going on. And over the course of that, the next, God, I guess 7 years, I've just been continuing to learn about it and continuing to see things deeper and continuing to have insights. And my first kind of more formal introduction to the principles was through their One Thought Foundations program. And I kind of had a few really significant moments during that I just thought, wow, something's just clicked, something's just made sense to me that I never really got before. And I noticed as time went on, life started to feel easier, even though nothing had really changed in my life. Like and I know that we hear this all the time being said in the principles world, right? Like nothing changed on the outside, but everything changed on the inside. That was exactly my experience. I actually remember as part of this course we were doing, we got some one-to-ones with some of the faculty, and I was in one of the one-to-ones, and this is like a good chunk of time in. This is maybe 2/3 to 3/4 into the program, and I remember sitting on this call being like, I'm not getting it, I'm not understanding it, this like I'm doing the principles wrong, and I was really in a mess. And I got coached on that a little bit, and then towards the end of the conversation, my coach, the person across from me, was just like, so like, tell me about life though, like what else is happening, and what's going on with you, kind of thing. And I started to share how like, oh, I'm just not worrying about stuff anymore, and that's really true. Things don't really worry me in the way that they used to. And oh, I'm not feeling that stressed at work at the moment, and my relationship with my parents is just great right now. And it was like, and she was like, what? That's not the same person that was talking to me a minute ago. And it turns out that without realizing, all of this stuff in my life seemed to just feel a little bit easier when I hadn't even clocked that in my head. Was this really insidious well-being that creeped into my life. Yeah.
Wow. I was gonna say, that's amazing in 2 different ways, in as much as like it feels like it was like a gentle journey into the principles. It wasn't, you weren't looking for anything in particular. You started hanging out with Aaron and Leela, which is amazing, by the way. You know, the fact that you get the opportunity to hang out with them is awesome.
Yeah.
And to witness and observe something. And then there was something, like he says, the curiosity within you. I suppose what comes to me was, did it look too good to be true? Or, you know, what was that? What was beneath the curiosity? Do you know?
Yeah, I suppose it wasn't, I didn't have enough data to even know what it was that would be too good to be true, right? So I just kind of started noticing stuff that I quite liked the look of in them, just around that playfulness, that lightness, the energy around them, you know? And it was from that I just thought, okay, well, I'll see what this is all about. And it just kind of went from there. I don't think it was any kind of big decision to be like, right, now I'm going to go and learn about this thing. I didn't really know what to expect.
I love that. I love the fact that it was just this gentle, I'm liking what I'm seeing, so I'm just going to follow this. I'm just going to follow it, see where it leads.
Yeah.
And then the fact that you did the training, and even whilst you were doing the training, it's like, I'm not getting it until you're like, oh yeah, this is happening. and I love that. Like you said, we can get so caught up in our day-to-day doing life that we forget. It's like, it is different. I suppose, did it feel different? Because even though you were saying, oh, you know, you're not getting it, it's interesting. Did it feel different? Was there a feeling of difference? Or did you going through when you were recalling?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was one of those things that I had to have that conversation to even realize that there was, like, throughout the program, I loved the course. Like, everything I was learning, I was lapping it up and soaking it up. And like I said, I had these big insight moments, right? And some of those had even happened before this point. But maybe it was that I had this idea in my mind that I needed to apply something, and I wasn't doing that. So I was like, I'm obviously not doing it right because I'm not applying these learnings into my day-to-day life. And so that's when it just kind of caught me off guard to be like, oh, wait a minute, life actually feels quite nice right now. I'm quite different in a good way. And it's interesting that you ask that, because in my role is, like, what I do now is I'm a coach, you know, fast forward X number of years. And I do think it's really interesting what we're talking about here around how we don't often realize when we shift, when we change, when things improve. And part of my job now as a coach is to really help my clients see that like, this isn't something like in the past. I've done various different types of self-development, personal development trainings, all of that. And sometimes there can be these moments of like, oh, I've just learned something and then I apply it, and now that's it's fixed, that thing, right? And that's so useful in its own way. And this world is different. This world is like, it's not, there's nothing to apply. Once you see it, and you can keep seeing it deeper and deeper and deeper. And we forget, and I still forget, right? I still lose sight of it, and there are blind spots and all this stuff. But it can kind of just almost like infiltrate into our world. And part of my role as a coach is to show my clients, like, hey, do you know that that there was no way you would ever have even imagined saying what you just said 6 months ago, and like really helping them to see what the principles or whatever it is that they're learning is doing in their life, because it's so like ABC, right? It's so simple.
Yeah, it's interesting because when you say that, I remember when I started doing some work with Keith Blevins, and one of the things that he points out is that it's not the application, it's the implication. It's like, so rather than, like he says, traditionally it's like, I've learned this, there's something I need to do, therefore I feel I'm doing something, I'm getting better, or I'm moving closer towards something. Whereas with when Keith pointed out the implications, he said the fact that you understand this means that quite naturally these things are going to happen, and there's an implication. And as you said, even though we may not see it at the time, it's upon, you know, retrospectively, like, oh yeah, I used to, and now I do this. So yes, sometimes you can think that our job's even harder because people think, You didn't do anything. She was like, actually.
Yeah, 100%. I get it both ends of the spectrum. I get all the way at one end where it's like, you know, everything's different, but they don't attribute it to whatever it is that they've learned because it's so simple, it's so kind of under the surface. And then I get the other end where they're just like, this has been amazing and thank you so much. And I get to say you're welcome for not having said anything for an hour. This is what I know, is that they're coming to their own insights, their own answers, and that I see the power of their own creativity when they're slowed down, when they were able to get into their grounding and see what's there for them coming from their own wisdom, their own intelligence, and they think I'm something magical, and I'm just like, no, actually, that was all you. I did nothing there, but you're welcome.
And it is fascinating, isn't it? Because I suppose what comes to me is like, even though we don't do anything, the other part is we do something, in as much as we can hold that space. We can hold that space of non-judgment. We can hold that space of, I suppose the word that comes to me is hope. We can hold that space so that people can feel comfortable to share whatever comes into their head and also to tap into their wisdom. So yeah, you know, like you said, sometimes we don't even see it. It's just like, I didn't do it. Like I said, I didn't do anything. However, in being present, that's the gift, isn't it? Sometimes that's the gift.
And I really think there's something to be said for silence here as well, is that I think it's so mistaken and it's so overlooked. And so often in our lives, this was certainly the case for me, I don't give myself the space to complete a thought, right? You know, I'm a person who traditionally has had a very, very busy mind and sometimes still fall into that. But it's like I'm so quick. Everything that's going on in my mind was so quick that I wouldn't give myself the space to actually get to the end of a thought process. And so there's something so valuable about being able to make room for the silence. And the more and more that I do that, the more that I get to my own answers, find my own solutions, get to creative things that I wouldn't have otherwise come to, or even just feel a little bit more calm and peaceful in my day-to-day life, because I'm making way for that. I'm placing that as much of a priority as whatever else is going on in my mind, you know, that silence and that space. And there is so much to be said for that, I think.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the first things that we realize, isn't it, about listening? Like, we think we listen, and even depends upon what your background is. You know, I've learned about active listening, which is awesome. But then you think, no, this is, you know, there's, as Sid used to say, there's listening and there's listening, and you're like, but yeah, and it's interesting when I've worked with people, it's like I'm still, and they're like, are you listening to me? I'm like, yeah, this is what listening feels like, you know, real listening. So what then takes me then, because like you said, you know, fast forward, you're a coach now. So tell me about how I suppose the words that come to me is like how the principles have played a role in where you are now.
Yeah, sure. Well, I think the way that I look at it is the principles inform what I do and how I do it and how I live. So it's not that I'm doing the principles or I'm a 3 principles coach. It's that I come from an understanding and a grounding of the principles in every walk of life, whether that's my work in my coaching, whether that's in my relationship, whether that's in the way that I run a business, whether that's in the way that I, you know, my relationship with money, like whatever it might be, is I'm coming from that grounding of the principles. And that is a never ending journey, by the way. That is a continuous deepening and deepening and deepening. And so I would say the role that the 3 principles play is, you know, that it's that compass, it's that inner guide of coming back to what I think about as wisdom, or this kind of internal GPS system that we have, and being able to follow that and be guided by that, and knowing the role that thought plays in my life. It's just a couple of examples of the ways in which I'm using my understanding of the principles to show up, just to exist in this world. I'm coming from that place.
So what brought you to coaching?
Well,
yeah, because I heard you say you had a job and now you're a coach. So I'm just like, what brought you there?
Yeah, so when I actually trained with Aaron and Leela, that was me dipping my toe in the water of what might a career change look like. And I really had the full intention at the time to do the foundations program and then go off and do a counseling program or a therapy program. And I had no idea really. I was just kind of playing with it and thinking, well, I think I want to switch. My background was in project management, and I actually really loved that. Interestingly, I was working for a homelessness charity. I was really enjoying it. I was really good at it. But I just had that feeling of this isn't my calling, like maybe there's something more. And for years, there had been this little thing, some might call it wisdom, in the back of my mind saying, work with people, like one-to-one, help people, serve people. You know, I'm rarely happier than when I'm in a conversation with someone where I'm really supporting them and helping them through something. And so I followed the nudge and I thought, okay, then I met Aaron and Leela and it all kind of started coming together. And I was like, okay, I'm going to do this foundations program and see where it takes me. Probably going to end up getting a qualification in ... afterwards. And I got to the end of the program and it just, by then enough had clicked into place for me to be like, no, I thought I needed that other stuff because I was afraid of, I don't know if it was doing the unconventional thing or what will people say, or I need a really defined, tangible thing to say that I do. I'm a therapist, that kind of thing. And I realized all of that was my fearful thinking. And actually, what I really wanted to do in the world was, help people in the way that I had been helped. Kind of. I mean, it's not quite that. It's kind of, I'd seen something really big, right? I really shifted in my life, and the principles had impacted me so fundamentally. And I just thought, if I'm going to do anything with people, it's this. Like, why would I do something else now? That doesn't make sense. And so I kept training. I did the practitioner program. I did various coaching programs with various different practitioners and coaches. And I just started coaching. I started coaching my friends. I started coaching anyone who would say yes, as a, just alongside my full-time job. And I did that until beginning of 2021. Is that right? Beginning of 2022, when I went full-time. And I just thought, this is going well. I'm ready. I quit my job and I went for it. Mm-hmm. And so I've been working full-time since then as a coach.
Wow. And how, I suppose there's a couple of things. When you quit your job, was there any fear? I suppose that comes there. What was the feeling?
Great question. So I did a kind of bizarre and ridiculous thing, which is I quit my job and with nothing to go to, right? With this idea of creating a coaching practice for myself at exactly the same time as picking up and moving to Hong Kong. So I did both of these things in tandem. And I have to say, in retrospect, I had to have been led by my intuition there, because why would anybody in their right mind make these two huge life changes with no safety net, within reason, so to speak? No job to fall back on, nothing like that. It was just like, oh yeah, I can do this. I can start a business. Oh, and I'll move across the world to a country. But so anyway, so that was definitely one of those moments of being guided by whatever was within me. And it did very much feel like that. It did really feel like, this is the right decision for me, even though I don't have all the answers, even though I don't have the 3-point plan and how I'm going to make it work. So what was the question, Janet?
I think it was like the feeling. What was the feeling?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
So there wasn't fear. The thing is, by then I'd already been coaching for over a year. Part-time alongside my full-time job. So I knew that I was having impact. I knew that I was you know, what I was doing was right. I'd had enough of a feel for it by then to know I was on the right path. And I had enough people who I was coaching consistently tell me, yeah, I pay for this. You know, this is not, I get that you're doing this for free for me right now. And if there's a fee, there's a fee. I'm up for it. So I think there was enough, I had enough, I suppose, self-confidence, but also reassurance that actually there's something here that I can pursue. And I wasn't going in with my eyes closed. Like, I had a business coach, and I was kind of very aware that coaching and supporting someone is one skill, and running a business is a very different skill. And I very much do see it that way, that you know, I know a lot of Three Principles coaches who are struggling financially, and I kind of see it as there are these two very different skills. And I had this one down to the point of, like, I knew I was having impact. I knew I was supporting people to feel better in their lives, and to do more, and to get places, and, you know, whatever it was that they wanted to create in their world. And what I didn't have was any business acumen or any idea of how to do that, how to create income as a coach. And so I got the support that I needed, and I went with it. And yeah, it was a risk. It was a really big risk, but it felt right, and I followed it, and it paid off.
That's brilliant. And I suppose what comes to me is that reinforces the fact that when you do follow your wisdom, when you do something, and it's not just that it feels right, it's because sometimes you know, you can't trust the feeling. You know, when I say you can't trust the feeling, you can't trust your thinking. Your thinking creates your feeling. And so it's not always about that feeling. It's that, like you said, it's the knowing. That's what it is. It's the knowing that this is right. And it comes from, it's beyond cognition. That is a hard thing.
Yeah, I really agree with that. And I think there's also a kind of beautiful combination of the heart and the mind, or the heart and the brain in this, that, like, yeah, I did have that knowing. I did know that moving to Hong Kong was the right decision. I did know that quitting my job and starting a coaching practice was the right decision. But I didn't take that knowing or that wisdom and then just be like, all right, let's just see what happens, right? Like, I planned, and I figured it out, and I had my ear to the ground, and I was working out what's the best way to do this. And I think one can feed the other. Like, my wisdom was feeding that, but that doesn't make all of that logic and rationale useless, right? Like, it's almost like I was guided by my wisdom to do all of those practical things. And that's what I love as well, is that it's a fusion. It's not this kind of intangible spiritual thing that has no basis in the physical. Like, it is the first, Janet, I have to tell you, because it's so relevant to this, the first real insight that I had, like, after I started to learn about the principles. I remember it was in my insecure phase during that during that foundations program, and I was on another one of these one-to-ones, and I was doing the same thing of, I don't know what I'm getting wrong here, and I don't know what wisdom is. And the person in front of me at the time did a bit of explaining, and at some point I said, well, there's this one thing that's been just like coming up in my mind over and over again the last couple of weeks. Context: I was really, really stressed with my job at the time. There was a lot going on. I was feeling quite overwhelmed, too much to do, too little time, all of that. And I was feeling very, very, very stressed. And so I was saying, there's this one thing that's just kept coming up, but it probably doesn't count. And she was like, okay, what is it? I said, well, the thought that keeps popping up is, do one thing at a time, just one thing at a time. And I was like, that doesn't count, does it? And she was like, yeah, that counts. That counts. And because for me, it was like, we're talking about these big spiritual insights. That's not what this is. This is like a really obvious, practical, tangible thing. And that can't be an insight. And of course it's an insight, right? And I got to see that in the moment, that sometimes insights come as a really practical command, right? Do one thing at a time, go figure. Yeah, that's helpful. Right. And it's like, I love that about insight and about wisdom, is that it's really practical, it's common sense, it's really in the here and now. And yes, it can be, we are the infinite intelligence behind life, and we are the universe and all of that, and I feel that so strongly, and I have a very spiritual understanding as well that I fall back on. But I love the fact that it can be so practical and so simple and so kind of in your face, that like, yeah, these really obvious practical things that counts. That's wisdom, that's insight. And so I think I probably used a lot of that in the kind of beginnings of my coaching practice, to be like, okay, well, yes, I'm being nudged in a kind of bigger knowing way, but I'm also aware that I need to learn these 10 things in order to be able to take the next step, or whatever it might be.
I love that, because like you said, when you can be in the, let's say, personal development or development field, and sometimes you can look at the spiritual and it seems to be like this ethereal, whether it's tarot, or this is like something that's intangible and it's mystical and mythical, and the principles go, no, this is it. And it's very practical. And like you said, it's because it's both at the same time. Like I said, we have that space that allows us to have an insight which is so practical that you don't even question. It's like, oh my gosh, that's it. That is it.
Yeah.
So I love how you say that, the fact that it is practical and it's spiritual at the same time. Yeah. Love it, love it, love it. So I'm now going to start, because now I'm going to start asking you about BIPOC and why you're part of BIPOC, but also because you're part of BIPOC, I know you also have been supporting people from Palestine as well. So I really want to just say a bit about that as well, really, before I move on, because I'm thinking, okay, this could be the structure. It's like, I've got insider knowledge. And I think it'd be really great just to share some of the work that you've done, what's inspired you to do that work, and and how that has been for you and for others.
Yeah, sure. Well, I guess first, to give you a little bit of context. So primarily what I do is I work, like, professionally, is I will work with individuals, leaders, to help them to kind of, understand where their experiences of stress or frustration or conflict is coming from, and help them to kind of get a sense of clarity and move through into resilience and be more productive, creating more space in their minds, more space in their calendars, as a result of that, and actually helping them to be able to create what they want to create in life, be able to let go of that feeling of being stuck or not quite sure of the direction they're going in, and move towards what it is that they want to achieve in life. That's what I primarily do. But I've always, since I started working, had some, supported people from marginalized communities in some way. So alongside that work that I do with leaders, I, as an example, I run a program once a year for queer people of color. Mm-hmm. In Hong Kong, I ran a program for migrant domestic workers there. So I've always had some experience around working with marginalized communities. Then in terms of Palestine, and so that kind of where that came from, I mean, of course, it's something that, not of course, but it is something that's very, very close to my heart. I visited Palestine for the first time a couple of years back with my partner, who's lived there over the years. And so when everything happened on October 7th, it was really difficult. It was really painful to kind of watch these events unfold. And as with anything really, in my professional life, I'm always kind of on the lookout for, how can I serve? How can I be of service here? How can I support what is going on? And so if I'm approached, then usually my answer is yes, depending on my capacity. Like, it's normally like, yeah, I've actually been thinking about this already and I would like to help, please. So so I got a message from a friend who talked about some, you know, Palestinians in the UK who are recently bereaved as a result of what's been going on. And so my spidey senses went off, and I was like, right, how can I help? How can I support? It expanded over time as we, my partner and I ran it together alongside Jacqueline Hollows. But what it became was a series of essentially one of the participants named it a healing space for Palestinians, and later on it expanded into the Arab community and the Muslim community, to come together and to listen and to be heard and to feel supported. And actually a lot of what people were going through, whether it's, you know, Palestinians themselves who were grieving, or whether it's activists and campaigners and allies who were feeling burnt out or feeling guilt, and so there were all of these themes that were coming out across, like what are people really experiencing right now, and so we created this group in this space to support people to actually, you know, with whatever it was that they were going through, whatever it was. And it was so special. I feel so honored to have been able to be in that room and to support however I could, and to give space to people who often don't get a chance to share their voice around this. And it's a, you know, it was a small 5-week program, but it's going to be expanding, and we're currently looking into how we can continue to support people. What we found is that quite often when big things blow up in countries of conflict, there's a whole load of support that gets thrown at them initially, and then there's a kind of shelf life to that, and people stop offering free services and support and all sorts of things, and so we didn't want to fall into that same trap, and we wanted to be able to continue to offer support beyond the kind of initial crisis mode support that is all over the place. So that's what we're working on now, is like, how do we create longevity around this? How can we create connections? We had people join from all over the world, so it's kind of like creating a way to continue to offer that support, because realistically, even though it might be out of the papers soon, it's still, you know, it's still happening. Problems are still there, and they still need supporting, whether it's people in Palestine, the diaspora, or activists.
That's beautiful. That is so beautiful, and I feel your heart in that, in what you're sharing and where you're coming from. So I love that. Thank you for sharing that. And also, as I was listening to you, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's what Love BIPOC is. Listening to everyone. Doesn't it just work out the way it's supposed to work out? When you go with it, honestly, for anybody who's watching this, have not planned the questions whatsoever, and I'm just like, look at the thread. It's amazing. Following wisdom. Anywho,
Love it.
So yes, and I'll ask the question anyway. So why Love BIPOC? Why are you part of this work party?
Yeah, I love that question, because I have another story to tell you, which is so when I first came across the principles and I started getting involved in everything, it didn't take me long to notice that there wasn't a huge amount of people of color representation, and I don't think I was very surprised at the time. You know, like most of the people who were speaking on the screen, on the stage, were white, and it didn't surprise me, because, like I said, I've been around personal development pretty much my whole life, and that tended to be the case. You know, like the speakers that, you know, they tended to be predominantly white spaces as far as the spaces that I was a part of. And so I didn't really think that much of it until George Floyd happened, and there was this big movement in 2020, and this BIPOC group was formed. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. I'll come along to a meeting. I think it was one of the early meetings I came along to, and I showed up to this Zoom call, and And I was shocked. And what went through my mind was, I can't believe there are so many of us. Now, bear in mind, there were about 10 people, 15 people on that call. It was not a large number. And I felt so, it was so interesting to be like, that many people made me think, what? That like, it really clicked for me. It was like, wow, like, this is not these, I don't know who these faces are. I've never seen these faces before. Where are they? But also just the fact that it was such a surprise to me that there were 10 of us, because in my mind there were like 2 or 3, you know, like just because I hadn't seen them anywhere. I wasn't seeing myself reflected on stage at these kinds of events and various 3P platforms. And so I thought, yeah, absolutely, I've got to be involved in this, and I've got to it was just beautiful to be able to be a part of the space and to be able to hear stories that sounded not dissimilar to my own story, and, you know, be able to relate and be able to kind of have this wonderful connection with people from all over the world. And I just think it's so important. I think it's so important that you know, future 3P students don't have the same experience that I had of like, it's just all one face, it's all one voice, or one type of, and so I think what we're doing here is really, really important, and I think it's great that, and actually that has, you know, in terms of the conferences and all of that has started to change over the years. You know, credit where credit's due. Definitely there is more diversity amongst the speakers at events, and what I love about this space is that this is our voice, and we are choosing to put ourselves out there in the way that we want to, with in the mode that we want to, like all of that, talk about the things that we want to, and I think it's really important, and I think it's really special that it exists, and I'm just really, it's such a pleasure to be a part of it.
Oh, that is wonderful, honestly, and I think because I was also going to ask you what would you say to anybody else, but I think you've just encapsulated it within your response there, and I know, and I'll speak for myself. That's exactly the same response and reaction I had when I turned up to the first.
Really?
Honestly, even though, like I said, even though I've been around for years, I know I went to a conference in Minnesota, and that shocked me, because even though the people on the stage are the ones that we're used to seeing, in the audience, there were people who've been around this as long as, if not longer than, the people on the stage. And they were running church groups in the community, groups with substance. And I'm just like, oh my God. And these were people. So everybody in the audience, there was more diversity in the audience than there was on the stage. I'm like, what the heck? And then after George Floyd, and when you talk about practitioners of the principles, after George Floyd, I came, you know, when I came to the first meeting, and it was more than 10. I couldn't catch my breath. I think what angered, and I was angry, I was very angry. What angered me was that there were people that knew Sid, had never been on a 3 Principles platform. Bleep, very, very bleep. And so I had to take myself away for a while, because I just thought, I cannot handle, because I'm so angry, so upset. And so yes, like you said, this is why we have this platform, so that, and not only that people can hear the voices, but also you don't have to scroll through 6,000 pages on the 3PGC site before you find somebody that looks like you. So
yeah,
I love that. I love that. Part of me is thinking that I don't have any more questions to ask right now. I really feel, this is just me personally, I feel very full, really, really, really blessed.
Me too.
Yeah. So I suppose if you have any parting comments for anybody who is thinking about being a member, not just of the work party, just attending any of the groups that we do, Yes, answer that first, and then.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. The way that I look at this is just, you know, if you're interested in something, follow it. You know, just that was, and that's how I came into the principles. That's how, you know, it's never served me wrong, right? As a philosophy, it's like, just if it feels good, if it feels nice, if you want to experience it more, or even if you're just curious, like, follow it and see what happens. And there's no, you know, this is not a membership platform where you have to subscribe, and it's like, we're here to talk to you. And also the other thing I would say is, we're real people and we're not scary, so approach us, you know, email us, we will reply. You know, get in touch with me if anything that I've said is resonating with you from this conversation. Like, reach out. I would love to hear from you, and I know that will be the case for you, Janet, as well. Yeah, I think that's it, really. Just follow your nose and you won't go wrong.
And in saying that, where can people find you or contact you? I mean, I will put contact details below and in your bio, but where can people find you?
The best way really is just my email address, Shazia, Shazia, coaching@gmail.com. I am dabbling in Facebook more recently, for the first time in a very long time. So you'll find me there, and I can give you the details of that as well. But email is probably the best way to contact me.
That's brilliant. Shazia, thank you so much for your time. I've really, really enjoyed speaking with you. I've loved it. Thank you.
Thank you, Janet. I've really enjoyed it too. It's been so nice to have a chat with you. Thanks for having me.
Oh, you're welcome.